On this episode of This Week in Space, we beam into perhaps the most important debate of all time, Star Trek versus Star Wars. Join us. It's fascinating.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 131, recorded on October 4th, 2024. The Star Wars versus Star Trek food fight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of This Week in Space, the Trek versus Wars edition. Yes, we've been ginning up for this for a long time, and we just couldn't put it off any longer because I know what's best. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief at Aster Magazine. I'm joined, as always, by the elegiac Tariq Malik, editor-in-chief of that Rosetta Stone of space news websites, space.com.
Hello, Rod. Nanu, right?
Do you know what elegiac means?
No, I was going to just skip it and assume everyone knew that I knew, but what does elegiac? I thought you were just like sneezing in the middle of saying allergic, but
I looked it up. It's not entirely positive, but I can't remember what the definition was because it was a couple days ago. Today,
I will take offense. I will take offense for sure.
Today, however, we are tackling that greatest of human debates: Star Trek versus Star Wars.
Woo!
Which one is the best?
Did you see my Jim Kirk as a T-Rex t-shirt? Can you see that here in the video?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. So I dressed the part.
You did.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's getting kind of hot in here. So let me just, I need to change my shirt.
Oh no. Oh, so is this going to be a one-sided discussion then? Maybe I'll just. Wow.
I can't.
For people who aren't watching, Rod just like took off his shirt to reveal basically like a full command red
let me do the
TNG uniform.
There we go. I look like William Riker after an excess 30 years of way too much drinking. But anyway, there we go. And I have to tell you, I had bought this. I'm wearing my Star Trek Next Generation tunic. I bought this a couple of years ago for something and put it away and never wore it. And then I pulled it out last night. And I thought, this is perfect. And it's got a little bit of a zipper in the back. But I tell you, getting it on the first time and then trying to get it off was not a pretty thing.
Is it a onesie?
It doesn't have like feet on it or a snapping crotch or anything. It's just, it's a thing with a zipper in the back. It's a tunic, shirt. But it's like if you're listening audio, it's like 10 pounds of sausage in a 5-pound sleeve. So
you wear it. You wear it well.
I wear it proudly.
Well. Yeah. So I think that's worth like 3 chairs, man. Everyone forgets I got my Star Trek chair right here. Wait, can I move so people can see it? There it is. So,
all right, go ahead and show me up. Anyway, I'm sure some of the listeners have opinions. No worse than Trek. No, that's you, Anthony. But as I've said before,
Jammer B says that Star Wars is for kids. Ooh, it's like
Jammer B, you're my man. As I've said before, there's no faster way to start a food fight than to walk into a NASA facility cafeteria. I'm thinking JPL in particular in my case, and sit down at a table and in the midst of a conversation, weave in that question, which one is better? And man, they just go at it. It's somewhat generational. And sometimes the scientists versus the engineers, you get kind of different stuff, but it can get ugly in a hurry. So without further ado, let's jump into this. Before we start, of course, as you're tired of hearing, please don't forget to do us a solid and be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, and all the cool podcast things for us because we have space jokes.
Yes, I've missed it. I've been looking forward to it all week.
I know, me too. I've been looking forward to your chuckle. Hey, Tariq.
Yes, Rod.
I once had a Wookiee steak, but you know what was wrong?
No.
It was a bit chewy.
Right,
oh, well done. Well done. Why can't a Jedi send photos in an email?
Why not?
Because attachment is forbidden.
These are good.
Yeah.
These are good.
I got a couple more. What do you call a Sith Lord that likes to buy stuff?
What? I don't know.
A shopping mall. MAUL.
I love
Hey,
it.
Tariq.
Yes, Ron.
How does Luke Skywalker get to Mos Eisley?
How? How does it
He
do?
walks.
That one took me a while. That one took me a while.
We got to see.
What, are there no Star Trek ones? At
How
all?
many more of? No, actually, I don't. Oh no, here's one. Here's one. Oh, there's two. Star Trek characters make the worst sports fans. They always root for the away team. Hey, Tariq.
Yes, Ron.
Why did Captain Kirk relieve himself on Prospero 4?
I don't know why.
He wanted to go where no man had gone before. That's actually pretty good.
That's good. That's a good one.
Okay, and here's a just to keep up our perfect record. Here's a lame one to end on. What is a pirate's favorite Star Trek character?
What, Ron?
Tasha Yar.
That's good. By the way, fan favorite Tasha Yar came back as a Romulan. You know, I think they really could have done more with her, but what are you gonna do?
There were some difficulties. I think so. I wasn't working on the show at that point, but I had the friend that got me in for Deep Space Nine was working on it. And I guess there were some challenges there, but
with Denise Crosby or with like the showrunner?
Yeah, with Denise Crosby.
Oh.
I don't remember the details, but I just remember hearing she was kind of absorbed by this big black pond or something, right?
Yeah, the goo thingamajig,
which was actually
embodiment of
like
hate or something.
300 pounds of graham cracker. Like Oreo powder that was mixed up with milk that she disappeared in, which was great until you came to the set the second day and it was still there. It didn't smell very good. Anyway, save us from the dark side. Send your best, worst, or worst a different space joke to twit@twit.tv because we need to go on to headlines and we can't sit around here making up jokes for you guys. We have important things to do here.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need your help.
So
headline news.
That sounds like my podcast. I always expect to hear BBC right after that.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of Jeff Jarvis's thing for his university. Craig Newmart. But I have to remember that we're going to use it, so I don't read right into it. So this isn't probably the most important headline, but I thought it meant the most to me. And since we're talking about Star Trek, partly today, Voyager 2.
I think you mean Voyager 2.
Sometimes abbreviated to Voyager, yes. Is shutting down one more instrument. I feel like we're watching this thing disappear off into its almost 13 billionth mile with little pieces flying off as it goes.
Yeah.
But it's remarkable that it's still working. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, yeah. So Voyager 2, 12.8 billion miles from Earth out there in interstellar space. NASA scientists over at JPL had to make the difficult decision this week to shut down one of its remaining instruments because of power. Basically, you know, these are powered by decaying plutonium from their RTGs, their radiothermal generators, right?
Generators,
Is that? And of course they're 47 years old, so they're I think they lose 4 watts of power every year, and they didn't have a lot of watts to begin with.
Like what, a year older than you, right?
No, it's like 6 months older than me. So because they launched in August, right? In August and September of 77, and I was born in April that year.
You know, it's funny. They've actually shedded a little bit of mass since they've launched, unlike you.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry.
Wow.
But so
Rod went there after talking about his uniform.
I don't. Well, I've already admitted about my mess.
But it was the plasma science instrument on on Voyager 2 that they
which
shut
is
down.
a shame because it's one of the, as I gather, one of the more important things to be studying out there. Yeah. But there is another instrument that can be used in kind of a workaround to do more or less the same thing, at least according to the person that I wrote to. So so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
and
And this was the instrument that was like the one that says, okay, yeah, you've left the heliosphere, so you're in interstellar space. So it's, thanks for the memories, plasma science instrument. But
and it was
thank you and good night.
I didn't realize it could only do a measurement once every 3 months, because that's the period of time or the interval in which the spacecraft would execute a 360-degree turn for something to do with its alignment with Earth. But anyway,
it's an axis that's pointed towards the sun. So
yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. I thought we were talking about spitting stuff in space.
But it's just amazing. I mean, when you think of these poor things out there, they use tape recorders for data storage and retrieval. So tape has been running over that little head inside the tape data mechanism for almost 50 years. And
yeah,
I can tell you, having lived through the age of 8-track and cassette, they never lasted that long. And especially with cassettes, because the little felt thing would always fall off inside and it wouldn't work. So I'm just astonished that these things are still going. And it's interesting, and I think I've mentioned this before as well, but I was talking to the chief engineer, mission manager years ago for a book, one of my 20, and we were talking about the RTGs.
That's a nice flex there. If no one
is it?
Heard it. $20. $20. I got like 8 of them. So
I said, what's because the half-life is 44 years or something. I said, shouldn't it be lasting longer? He said, it's not really that. It's not really the degradation of the plutonium strictly, but it's because the plutonium pellet is surrounded by bimetal housing, which is how the thermocouple
degrades,
works. Yeah. And the degradation is in 0G, there's little stalactites going from one piece of metal that slowly grow towards the other, and they begin to short them out.
Yeah.
And that's the primary mechanism by which these things fail. Anyway, by hook or by crook, now we were hearing before that they expected the Voyagers to both be pretty much done and gone as far as radio contact was concerned by 2025, which is next year. And now we're hearing the mid-2030s, and I guess part of that's because they've got this program of sort of triage going on.
Yeah. And it's a little sad because this instrument they turned off, Voyager 1 had one, and it stopped working in 1980. So, so that one conked out, 3 years, three years after launch. And then they turned it off in 2007 to save power. I guess they were hoping for it to come back in if a miracle happened in space. And so this one on Voyager 2 was really like the last one standing out there. And they had been really trying to hold off turning it off, because they've turned off other instruments before, Voyager 2 still has 4 working instruments on it, so that's good. But their days are numbered because like we're just talking about, the power won't hold. So
and amazing beyond that, I guess, to me, is the fact they could still maneuver these things. That they've got thrusters and gyros that still work. All right, let's move on. This is cute, Tariq. This is yours. These are all space.com, by the way. Vulcan salute. Let's do it. So ULA launched its second Vulcan Centaur rocket ever today. Was it today or yesterday?
It was today. Yeah, a few hours late. On
the CERT 2 flight.
Mm-hmm. It was actually a pretty explosive a flight. This one is from space.com. Did we say that other one was from JPL?
I had a
com drop. Yeah. I
said they were both from space.com. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The other one we were showing JPL site, but this is our coverage, but everyone else was following it too. But it was a gorgeous morning launch from Cape Canaveral, this new United Launch Alliance Vulcan Centaur rocket. Now for the folks that might not remember, this is their second one. The first one was in January. So this is certification 2. And this is the flight that was supposed to take Sierra Nevada. They don't call themselves that anymore. Sierra Space Systems Dream Chaser spaceplane on its first maiden voyage, but the spaceplane's not ready yet. So they put a mass simulator on it. And this is like their key crucial test flight to make sure that that the rocket itself as a new heavy lift booster is ready to fly national security missions. So the Space Force was watching this really, really closely, as well as other missions in the future. ULA wants to replace their Atlas V workhorse rocket with this booster, and so they really had to have everything go right on this. And Anthony, if you could scroll down like a little bit on that page there, because there's something really interesting that happened at the 39-second march, and I think I have a GIF a little further for folks watching. Here it is. So is this our
You have
GIF?
to
No.
get past all your freaking commercials.
You gotta get past all the ads. Oh my gosh, there's so many of them.
There are, isn't it embarrassing?
Some more. Oh,
Keep going.
here it is. Okay, so this is a GIF that we made of the actual launch for people who are watching on our video stream. And 39 seconds after liftoff, what looks like one of the SRBs, and I've got a model behind me over here.
Solid rocket booster.
Yeah, the solid rocket boosters. They can have up to 6, I believe, on this to increase the uplift capacity of the rocket. And this one only had 2, but it looks like one of the nozzles failed on the SRB, on the solid rocket booster. And so you see this big flare up, and then on the way uphill, it had more debris get burned off. Tori Bruno, ULA's CEO, says that failure doesn't seem to have affected the launch any, because the BE4, the 2 twin BE4 engines on the first stage were able to kind of keep going properly, and then the upper stage, that Centaur upper stage, compensated for whatever lift dropout they had from that failure, and were able to get into the perfect orbit that they were hoping to, which I think is a sun synchronous orbit. So that mass simulator is out there in the void doing whatever now forever and ever.
And you remind us that they're using Blue Origin engines on this thing.
That's right. These are the Blue Origin BE4 engines that Blue Origin has designed for their New Glenn rocket 2. This means that this mission is now 2 for 2 with these rocket engines for Blue Origin, after all of the trials and tribulations they had bringing them to service. So I would say that it does seem like everything looks good for the New Glenn version, because these engines do seem to be performing as expected for Vulcan Centaur.
And we're just seeing the end of this clip as it's trailing up.
It's a nice looking rocket. I mean, I have to say, it's a wide. We just saw on the video the SRB separate there, and of course,
but did you notice that the right hand one was the color of the burn was actually different?
Yeah, and I think one of them actually was out as well.
Huh.
So
interesting. All right, well, it's time to transport ourselves to an ad break, and we will be right back. Stand by. All right, two more quick.
That was really smooth how you did that, by the way.
Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Here, wait a minute. I should have gone. Take me out of here. Okay, solar flare. We have.
That's right.
Now this is going to be interesting. And are we going to see possibly at lower latitudes an aurora tonight?
That is the big question. But basically,
X7 is huge, right?
And no. X9. X9.05.
Oh, holy moly.
So earlier this week, we had an X7.1 solar flare.
I'm a doctor, not a radiologist. Sorry, go ahead.
That kicked off a CME that was going to come and give us a bit of a glancing blow. And we were, we always hope that when these CMEs and their particle clouds hit the magnetosphere, that they do amp up the auroras that we can see, and maybe they extend far lower than the polar regions in the Arctic, and we can see them in the States. So that was, coming this weekend. And one day before we recorded this episode, which was a Thursday, the sun fired off another one, an X9. It's the strongest solar flare directed at the Earth since 2017. There was, I think, like an X14 that was picked up on the far side of the sun, not facing the Earth earlier this year. But this is the strongest one that's been facing us. And we've got some video of it here from NASA on our space.com story. And of course, the Solar Dynamics Observatory, a lot of other satellites are watching the sun all the time for these things. And the hope, at least for skywatchers, is that when the CME, because they do believe there was a halo CME that popped off of this one, reaches Earth this weekend, that it will amp up the solar the solar weather, the northern lights, the southern lights as well, and we might get a pretty good show. If folks might remember, this similar thing happened, this 1-2 punch earlier in May, and we saw just dazzling auroras all the way down to like Alabama, which was crazy. I don't know if it's going to get that strong this weekend, if they materialize at all. And that's the question that the Space Weather Prediction Center is asking right now. They think that we could get up to a G3 geomagnetic storm level 3, which is fairly strong and intense. The ones in May were, I think, G4 or higher. And so, we're just kind of waiting to see how is it going to hit us. Is it going to be cause any disruptions to satellite signals and whatnot? And is it going to really make those northern lights visible? When it happened in May, it was cloudy and rainy all weekend here in New Jersey, where I typically work from in New York. But hopefully we'll get some good weather, and then we can see like what's what.
Well, all I can say is shields up, and we did get a note on the Discord from our good friend Jammer B, who used to send us notes on the chat when he was still in studio, saying, as he will, radiologists are doctors, aimed at me. And what I miss about his private messages or messages on the board when he was still here was that after most of them, I could hear in my head, "You moron." So anybody knows that. Okay, let's wrap up the headlines. SpaceX launches next week.
I just got one quick note, like a programming note for space fans everywhere, that next week's going to be a pretty sporty and exciting one if you like launches.
Sporty.
Yeah. On Monday, October 7th, we will kick off the morning with the Hera launch on a SpaceX Falcon 9. That's a mission that's going to go to the asteroid Didymos and Dimorphos. If that sounds familiar, it's the one that NASA's DART spacecraft smacked in the face a couple of years back. And so they're going to launch this mission to go there and see what's left of Dimorphos, or I believe is the name of the moon that NASA hit. Yeah. And it'll study it over time. Then, of course, a few hours later, Blue Origin is going to launch their brand new rocket ship, the RSS Kármán line. Is what they called it.
Are you serious?
They called it the RSS stands for reusable spaceship, but they named it Kármán line.
And how unlyrical!
Yeah, and it's like a lowercase line, like it's not even all capitalized, and. They could have gone like Von Kármán line. I don't know why, and then the picture they show is just the booster itself. So I don't know if they're going to reuse a capsule, but it's an uncrewed launch. They're going to debut it on October 7th, and this is like another crew rated vehicle, so they'll be able to launch two of them. I guess close together, and it'll carry 12 experiments, probably some for NASA. They like to fly stuff on these, but Kármán line, that feels like a thumb in the nose at Virgin Galactic to me, Rod.
Interesting.
Because Blue Origin's rockets can go above the Kármán line, and Virgin Galactic's can't. Oh, and then on October 10th is like the big show. SpaceX's Falcon Heavy is going to launch NASA's Europa Clipper mission to that moon that we can explore, but attempt no landing there. Right, Rod? And so that should be really, really exciting. Big caveat for both of these SpaceX launches: they've been grounded technically because of the second stage anomaly during reentry on the Crew 9 launch, which was last week as we're recording this. And we haven't heard if the FAA said, yeah, go ahead, you can launch, or if they're going to give them a pass to launch while they do their investigation. This was an upper stage issue post spacecraft separation. So I think the chances are good that they'll say, yeah, it's fine. So.
It's interesting. You were talking about these suborbital space tourism companies. I was just editing an article, something that you're no stranger to, about Space Perspective, which is a company out of, I think, Tucson, right?
Yes.
That is ginning up to send people on high altitude balloon flights, and we're talking 100,000 feet. So you are high enough to see the curvature of the Earth, and
the blackness of space too.
And I guess you'd call it a space-like experience. But there's, an interesting conversation we had there that we didn't have enough column just to go into in depth. But when you're talking about spending, in this case, probably $125,000, $150,000 for the balloon ride versus now $500,000 for Virgin Galactic for as long as they're still able to do this, or Blue Origin, what's high enough,
Yeah,
there's 100,000 feet versus 100 kilometers, which is the Kármán line, which is what Blue Origin goes to and what Virgin Galactic kind of scrapes beneath. I don't know. Would you pay $125,000 to $150,000?
The experiences
now, let me
are
just say,
very
though,
different.
Yeah, because you're up there for like 7 hours with the balloon ride, sipping champagne and wandering around.
And I think that the Space Perspective capsule has like a bathroom on it. It has this huge wraparound windows. It has Barco Lounge, like seating. It's like the box seats of
and
space.
it has snacks, which I know is important to both of us.
I don't know. I'm of like two minds. Number one, that seems like a nice staid kind of what's the word? Ferris wheel approach to space travel.
That's a good point.
But there is something that comes with like going up, climbing on a rocket and launching into space, on your back, or I guess on a plane, a space plane, because they do pitch up to get that experience. But I would kind of, I don't know how much is enough. Like, would I get real sick right away, like on a roller coaster? Right. Because then maybe I don't want to go all the way to orbit, and so these suborbital things would be enough for me. But then, like, would it be too short, and then I'll forget about it? I don't know. It's really hard to.
It seems to me that the Blue Origin flight is kind of the perfect middle ground for everything for me, just because. And I admit this is the immature side of my brain that's still 8. Looking, look at the rockets. Somehow the idea of actually climbing on a rocket and going up and coming back is a little more exciting, even though it's very short. And I kind of wonder, I mean, I've always felt, and this is a little bit of editorializing, so pardon me, but I've always felt that
Rod, no.
the Blue Origin system looked a little, it's less complex than what Virgin Galactic is doing. It doesn't have that feather maneuver and all that. So it feels safer to me. I don't know that it is, but going up in a balloon with a gondola, that it has a couple of soft failure modes and all that. So if something does go wrong, it just slowly comes back to Earth. And so it's probably safer. And it's interesting. The older you get and the less of life is ahead of you, the more concerned you are about personal safety. But probably we should be less concerned because, hey, there's not much time left anyway. Make room for the young and become Soylent Green. Let's go to another ad break, and then we'll come back for the whole reason that we're here.
Soylent Green is people, Rod. Come on.
Stand by. All right. And frankly, I think I'd probably come back as Soylent Gray, but that's just my...
I don't think Captain Kirk would want a suborbital experience. I don't think so. I don't think that he would be... Even though the real Captain Kirk launched on Blue Origin, I don't think that the character of Captain Kirk, of James Kirk, would be satisfied with just like a suborbital rocket launch. We should talk about, by the way, William Shatner as part of this discussion. Actually, we didn't put that in the notes, but I think that maybe we could talk a little bit about it.
Well, first, let's get into the conversation.
Let's get into it.
Now that we burned almost half an hour talking about headlines. So, Star Trek versus Star Wars. This is a long-term, age-old debate, and I thought I'd pull up before we start just a couple of comments I found online about this, because I thought, what other people think that are smart? So I went to a part of Reddit where there are actually smart people, and
was it the space.com Reddit?
No, there are no smart people there, And there's some interesting comments. So one said, the war is over and forgotten. Nowadays, both fandoms focus on hating their own franchises. Which I thought, okay.
It's a good point.
Another, Star Wars is the hero's journey with a lot of mythos and archetypes. Star Trek is fully automated space communism with futuristic secular humanism.
Space communism. Wow.
Yeah.
That's rough.
A little more mundane. So Star Wars is Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards and Knights in space. Star Trek is the promise of humanity. I like that one.
Yeah.
Now you can see my colors. Another, I see it as Star Wars is sci-fi fantasy, as Star Trek is sci-fi adventure. Not quite.
I don't know. I had a Choose Your Own Adventure Star Trek book as a kid, but not a Star Wars one. So.
Oh, there you go. Here's next to last. Star Trek explores human issues, morals of exploration, and ethical questions. Doesn't say anything about Star Wars. And my favorite, because I thought of it, the difference is maturity. All right. But So as you point out here in the opening line, tell me when you saw it and under what conditions and what your reaction was.
For each one?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay. So I first became aware of Star Trek when I was like, I guess in elementary school. My cousins were watching a horror movie, and it was really, really scary for me. Which I found out later, it was
It's probably the crawling eye or something.
no, it was that one that's like the Monsanto company that makes the zombie virus. The warning sign. It was Warning Sign. They were watching the Warning Sign movie, and it was really scary for me. So I went to a different part of my aunt's house, and they had like a little black and white TV in the sewing room, and I was flipping the two channels that it got, and it was Star Trek, and that was how I watched my first episode of Star Trek. Didn't even know what it was. It was in the middle of the episode. I can't even tell you which one it was because the picture was so faint, but you could see the great bird of the galaxy, right? The Enterprise ship, although I know that's Gene Roddenberry. Like briefly in the snow static screen, and that was enough for me, and that was it. I was like hooked to try to figure out like where that was. I think it was on Fox, like Channel 5 or whatever.
And here's the difference between your childhood and mine. You had more than one television.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, hate to go an old man talk here. When I was a little kid, we had one. It was supposed to be black and white, but it was actually kind of green and white.
Yeah.
TV with about a 9-inch screen and a huge box around it. And, rabbit ear antennas, of course, and all that junk, over the air only. Then the big deal was we got a portable black and white TV on wheels.
Wow.
Which you could take to different rooms. And then we got a 13-inch Sony Trinitron that was, I think in 68, it was like $1,300 or something. I was horrifying when you think of how much that is today. But so that's my memory of it. In 60, well, actually, it was in the first year of Star Trek. My sister, who's about 5 years older than me, and I used to struggle over the time slot because they programmed Star Trek against Lost in Space.
Oh, wow.
I, of course, was the Lost in Space fan because I was, still a little kid.
Oh, danger, Will Robinson.
She being more mature preferred Star Trek, and I have to say, in hindsight, Lost in Space was pretty miserable. And, we talked about this when we did our favorite space TV shows thing, but later in life, I took a class from a guy who had directed a number of Lost in Space episodes, like shortly after the pilot, actually. He got involved very early. And I said, every now and then I'd be watching, like when the Carrot Man episode came on, there was a guy who was a big styrofoam carrot with a carved out face and his face painted orange. He was the same guy that played the traitor on the Trouble with Tribbles episode, I think. And it was beyond dreadful. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It was Lost in Space at its
so
worst
funny
moment.
That you say that.
And I said, wait. And I said, how did you come to the? I mean, somebody had to look at this script and say, yeah, that's good. It's like the GM executives gathering around the Pontiac Aztec and saying, yeah, that looks great. Let's go for it. And he did confirm for me that it was often a case of script being driven by dumpster diving. If they walked down the lot and found a bunch of props from some other horrible B film that had just wrapped and they were tossing stuff and they found stuff they could use, like in one case, aliens wearing white sequin top hats and black capes and black socks over their face. Then they rewrote the episode, much like Roger Corman. So that's how they got some of their horrible stuff. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that it's interesting that this Lost in Space versus Star Trek dichotomy, which is totally, we could do that too if we really wanted to. But both franchises have seen resurgences in like the last like decade, where you had Lost in Space not only come up with the 1998 movie. Which, I think is worth watching, but it's not great, but I think it's fun.
Which movie, The Lost in Space?
The Lost in Space 1998 one. Yeah. I mean, I think it's decent. It's decent and the robot's awesome. But then of course they have the Netflix show too. And then of course for Star Trek, we have how many new shows out now and how many new shows and films coming out in the future. And it's about time. I think that is one of the big things for Star Wars, because for Star Wars we had 3 movies and that was it for 20 years, and for Star Trek you always had something on, starting in the 80s. after the resurgence following the films themselves as they came out. So
Yeah, they just churn them out like popcorn.
Star Wars, and I recognize that I didn't talk about that, but my first exposure to Star Wars was actually going to see the Three Amigos in the movie theater and seeing the the trailer for Spaceballs in front of it.
Oh, good Lord.
And then my cousins explaining to me that they were making fun of Star Wars, so I had to go watch that. And I think I was like 7 or 8.
This is what I think of Spaceballs. Look at that, huh?
Ah, nice. What is that? A Phaser Mark II? Right?
No, it's the original phaser from a Deep Space. Did you ever see? You were a Deep Space Nine watcher, weren't you?
Oh God, I've watched that series like 3-4 times.
Remember Trials and Tribulations?
Yes. In fact, I bought
This
VHS.
was made for that episode.
I bought the VHS double tape set.
This was made for that episode, and the phaser
it.
comes off and everything. Yeah, so I made off with this after the thing wrapped. Actually, that's not true. I bought it. But I bought it out of the production.
I bought the Trials and Tribulations double VHS set that came with the Trouble with Tribbles episode and a little Tribble that would purr in a nice little display box back when all we had was VHS at, and I kid you not, the Star Trek Experience at the Las Vegas Hilton in Las Vegas, and it was so much fun. And none of my friends wanted to go with me, Rod, when I went, and I don't understand why. Because you could go to Quarks.
What? Wait, you asked both of them, and neither would go with you?
I found there was like 10 of us on that trip together, and I was the only one that went. But anyway, I had a good time. I also found out that I'm a direct descendant of Patrick of Jean-Luc Picard, because the Borg were after me time traveling in that experience. So
I don't know. You always look more Ferengi to me. Let's go to an ad break. We'll be right back. So I think we need to kind of ground ourselves in this. We've sort of been all over the place. And I just want to finish very quickly my Star Wars side of my experience. So I had seen Star Trek as a kid, loved the show, was very anxious to see Star Trek the Motion Picture. And I say that profoundly because it was a very serious thing, a very long and very serious thing. And that came out about the same time as the first Star Wars movie, Episode 4. And so I had seen, because everybody was going to see Star Wars, I was in my, I would be late teens, almost 20. Ran off to the movie theater, and that opening scene of the first Star Wars was freaking transformative. Very craftily designed. George Lucas is not, in my book, a great director. He's kind of a working man's director, I guess. But the visual effects on that film were something we had never seen before. So you see the little Princess Leia's ship go scooting by overhead.
Excuse me, that's the Tatooine 4, Rod. The Tatooine 4, Rod.
Tantive, not Tatooine.
Tantive. Oh yeah, wow, Anthony coming in
corrected
for the
wait,
clutch.
Wait, did Jammer B correct you? No, not yet.
No.
And then the Imperial Star Cruiser comes in, being a big triangular thing. And very cleverly done, because in that opening scene, before we know anything about the Star Wars universe, little point, and it gets wider and wider and wider and wider and wider, and then it starts firing on the other one with laser beams that are more or less aimed in the right direction.
Pew, pew.
But it was a spectacular shot, and I kid you not, I think I saw that movie 11 times just to see that opening scene. The rest of it, less so, but that opening scene was pretty amazing. So, as kind of a baseline, though, I would propose that if we're going to compare the two franchises, if you're taking the high watermark for those two franchises, and people may not agree with this, but it seems like the popular sentiment is the high watermark of Star Wars is Empire Strikes Back, and the high watermark of Star Trek, at least if you look at the whole franchise, the movies, has got to be Wrath of Khan.
I disagree profoundly.
Do you
that.
now?
Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, is the best Star Trek movie 6 of all time.
I'm gonna pop rivet an eye patch on the middle of your forehead just for that. It's too long. It's slow.
It is amazing. You've got
but wait a minute. Wait. Wrath of Khan Reportedly, Shatner and Ricardo Montalban never did a scene together live. They were both talking to C-stands as one does when you're in a movie and the other actor's busy.
What's a
But
C-stand?
those two guys. Oh, sorry. It's a grip stand for a production. It's a big metal stand that's got arms on it, and you usually stick a little cutter or a cloth circle or something on the top of it at about eye level, so that you know you're talking in the proper eye line if the other actor isn't available. But to see William Shatner, who's, let's just say, Shakespearean in scope, ranting at the screen, and Ricardo Montalban strutting around with those 50-year-old massive pectorals of his, which I thought were plastic, but they were real.
Was amazing, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the interplay between those guys was sensational. And of course, we had the famous God from Kirk. But I thought that, it's like watching these two big armor hams strutting around stage, spouting all this Shakespearean bluff at each other. I just thought that was unbeatable.
Star Trek Wrath of Khan has the best uniforms.
Well, if you like frill, yeah.
And I will say,
but I will give you for Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country, Christopher Plummer.
Yeah,
was definitely he was the high watermark for acting on that show.
And I'll just point out one thing about Star Trek Wrath of Khan, because I have like 3 versions of that film. The only Star Trek film that has its own off Broadway musical that I have seen in person, which was Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, the musical. Saw it last year with Zadie and my wife Jasmine, and it was amazing. Absolutely. And people were dressed up in Star Wars stuff there too. There were Jedi and crew members for the Enterprise living together, watching an amazing performance, and it brought us all together.
Maybe this is an indication of the core of our argument. So for Star Trek, we have a participatory thinkers live show, and for Star Wars, as I've noticed recently on my Instagram feed for the Los Angeles market, we have a burlesque show for Star Wars, which the ad features a svelte young woman with the long gown, cut up on one hip, holding out a lightsaber sort of delicately. And I thought, burlesque Star Wars? I can't wait to see Jabba the Hutt in a bikini. So sorry. Yeah, we got a.
God! I almost spit coffee out all over the.
So let's look at some categories.
Hey, don't fat shame Jabba, man. Come on, everyone is entitled to wear what they want to wear when they go to the beach. So.
Well, I tell you, and I felt like Jabba the Hutt putting on this costume this morning. So, and getting it off later is going to be a trick.
Oh my God, the coffee went up my nose.
But I don't what you give me.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at some categories. So we talked about potential best of the best. Although Jammer B, who may be the only person on Discord today, says Voyage Home.
Yeah.
Voyage Home Wales. And it's interesting. So that was Star Trek 4 of the movies. And you got to the point in that movie where you're kind of, you were looking at the whales in the tank and you were looking at Scotty and saying, I can't really see the difference anymore. But that's just me.
Hello, computer.
more fat shaming. Scotty had gotten pretty large by then. So for intellect, for the kind of the smart sci-fi intellectual angle, which one do you sign off on?
I think that it has to, we are biased. I don't know why we're trying to have a Star Trek versus Star Wars discussion when we clearly both enjoy Star Trek better. But I think that Star Trek is more intellectual because it has a whole, it's a merit-based system, right? You have to know what you're talking about to become an officer, an ensign, or whatever.
Unlike podcasting, as we can prove, yes.
And in Star Wars, you're born with midichlorians. Yay, right? And
with what?
Midichlorians. That's what makes people strong in the Force. They have a high midichlorian count. These little organisms that live inside us.
Conversation?
And that came in the first prequel in Phantom Menace, and now they try to backtrack it by just calling it an M count. They don't call them midichlorians anymore, but it just retconned everything. And so it's like there's no meritocracy a system ever. You can't just go to school to become a Jedi or a Sith. You have to be born with this stuff, and the
How
rest of us are
uncool.
plebes and,
Yeah.
you know, at your mercy or whatever. So,
Well, that kind of brings up a good point, I guess. Of to me, Star Trek was always kind of a morality play, and Star Wars was more of a fun fantasy romp. So I have to give intellect to Star Trek generally.
Yeah.
Although, what I can also say, I mean, Star Trek spawned an incredible fan movement. I remember during I think it was the O.J. Simpson trial, there was a juror that showed up in her Starfleet uniform.
Yeah.
And she was being grilled by the judge, I guess, for jury selection. And she said, "I'm here to represent my crew and my people." And he's like, "Next,
let's go, Anthony. Let's go to line 40 or 41, either one of those, for the run sheet, and we'll talk a little bit about that rundown, because nowhere in Star Wars that I know of will you see a cameo by an astronaut, whereas in Star Trek you had astronauts in the Next Generation. Mike Fink and Terry Virts, who we've talked about, were in the final episode of Enterprise. And here's Samantha Cristoforetti, the only astronaut who has a Barbie doll that I own, dressed in Catherine Janeway's uniform from Star Trek Voyager on the International Space Station. So
when I woke up this morning, my first thought was not, I wonder if Tariq owns any Barbie dolls.
it's an action figure of
there you go,
official ESA Samantha Cristoforetti.
But let me finish my point though. So we have this movement associated with Trek of people wanting to be, you know, part of this bigger, greater dream. So they do. I mean, I'd call it cosplay, but it's almost like a lifestyle of, you know, I'm part of the Federation because that's more exciting than my real life. On the other hand, you have the whole Jedi thing in Star Wars, which I never really fully got my head and my heart wrapped around, actually inspiring real life religions and philosophical movements.
Yeah.
Which is pretty remarkable, considering
like
that it's
monks,
basically, it's basically a space soap opera. That was astonishing when I saw that.
One thing that I think that we should probably point out too is that the circular nature of both of these franchises, right? Because little Roddy Pyle, you know, watches.
Don't use that nickname. I hated that nickname.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Little Rod Pyle watches the first seasons of Star Trek in the 60s. And then Star Wars comes out in 77. And then everyone is like, oh my God, we need to have the next Star Wars. So then what was it? Desilu or CBS or whoever it is like, well, with Paramount, we've got Star Trek. Let's do that. So they make the motion picture to try to be the next Star Wars. Then a bunch of these other kids see Star Trek and they're like, wow, I'd like to go in space. Then they become astronauts like Samantha Cristoforetti, who then appear on Star Trek. and then, you know, when Star Wars, The Force Awakens came out, they broadcast it opening night on the International Space Station. They have a movie projector up there where they can watch movies. So it's like this whole big circular thing that just pushed us all. They've launched lightsabers to space on the space shuttle, you know? So.
Well, I do want to say, I want to back up a step on the Star Trek movie side. So the series, you know, 65, 66 or 66, 67, 72 episodes, I think, or was it 73? I think it was 72. You know, for its time, it was spectacular because we hadn't seen anything like that on TV, because I'm old enough to remember what TV for science fiction was like before Star Trek, and it was pretty awful. You know, the rockets had sparks flying out the back that went down, the smoke went up, and it was pretty miserable stuff. Then Star Trek the Motion Picture comes out, as you point out, sort of Paramount's answer to Star Wars. And with great anticipation, I trucked over to one of the big local theaters and sat down and was very excited about this. And let's just say, so screenplay, the core of the screenplay by Alan Dean Foster, so you know it's going to be good science fiction. It was a very intellectually stimulating movie, but it was long.
Yeah.
Then they released, decades later, the director's cut. And my first response, I'm looking at this, and it says 12 extra minutes of footage you haven't seen. It's like, wait, you added more shots of Sulu staring out at the great expanse of Voyager with his head going back and forth like one of those little puppets on your dashboard of your car. And so I personally, I loved Voyager. I thought the visual effects were great. It was interesting, though. Remember the wormhole sequence? This just like orange vector graphics.
Yeah, with the asteroid.
Yeah, so Robert Abel Visual Effects, who were behind building the Enterprise 1701A, were commissioned to do the effects for that movie. That's all they got done. And this was after spending almost $200,000 on that ship, which in 1977 was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And it's the best of the ship miniatures I've seen. It was hands down the best. I got to work with that beautiful thing for a weekend. But, for Robert Abel to grind out millions of dollars in this one kind of crummy effect, then they brought in it was the same company that did Star Wars. So it was Industrial Light and Magic, I think.
Yeah.
To do the rest of the effects. Once you got inside of Voyager, that was in a big screen. That was pretty spectacular.
The music is great too. I mean, Star Wars has
Jerry Goldsmith versus John Williams. Yeah.
That is hard. It's a hard duo. I would say the one big drawback for that film, because all of the Star Wars films are all original, right? They all came out. Yeah. There wasn't a TV show, and maybe because it was when I saw it, I was very close to the TV show when I saw the film, and I was already watching The Next Generation, and to me, Voyager was just a souped up version of the robot from the TOS episode. Was that one where they meet another robot that's looking for its creator? The Nomad. I am Nomad.
You will be sterilized.
So, but I don't know. We've truly been debating everything.
Well, we're kind of shuffling through this, so this must be a good time for an ad break, and we'll reposition ourselves to be right back.
Let's do ships next. Yeah, let's
ships, huh?
Ships. We should talk about ships. So
let me do a right turn and just say of the spaceships of my youthful memory, the Discovery from 2001: A Space Odyssey kind of takes the cake, because you can actually think of that as being something real as opposed to these push button gravity. What's making my feet just stick to the floor? I don't know. It's just a thing. I push this button and I have gravity.
Gravity plating, Rod, clearly, right?
Yeah, okay, well. And so Rick Sternbach was one of the art directors on Next Generation, and we were doing a stand-up kind of a presentation together. And afterwards, I pulled him aside and I said, because I never met him when I was working on the show. He was always over at the lot, and I was always over at the effects stage. But I said, explain to me how this goofy push-button gravity works. And I expect him to chuckle and go, that's no big deal. He went into this long explanation about, I don't know, quark germinators and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like,
well, you
actually memorized this?
You almost had one on DS9. There was going to be the gravity-free room, but for one of the characters, because she had a disability and couldn't walk on normal 1G on the space station, so she would have a 0G room. But of course, they cut that character out because of the effects budget it would cost.
Yeah, I was going to say, and back then, I think an expensive episode was about $1.3 million.
Yeah, which
by today's standards is like you simply laugh. But, all right, you want to talk about spaceships?
Let's talk about ships. So the ships is what really got me more into Star Trek than into Star Wars, because you have ships that are really iconic. The Enterprise, people know what you mean when you say the USS Enterprise, even if they never watched the show. And NASA's first space shuttle was called Enterprise because of Star Trek and the fans who wrote in to tell NASA they have to name the shuttle that, and even
but it was just this was the glide and landing test.
This is the glide, yeah. You can go see it. Yeah. You can go see it in New York over here, and it's amazing. And even the first Virgin Galactic ship was called Enterprise, the one that they lost. Yeah. And so those ships to me, I think were like the iconic draw. These big, like, space going vessels that had the torpedoes on it. You don't have torpedoes really in Star Wars. They going faster than light meant something, right? Like, you had like your different warp factors, but it was dangerous because you had to have the reactors, like the engine room stabilized and everything, the warp core. Like, it was this whole, everyone was working together to keep those ships going. But in Star Wars, the ships are a dime a dozen. They blow up all the time. They get another one. There isn't like any like big identity. Do you know like all the ships by name? But we're Star Trek fans, so we might be biased. There's the
Yeah,
Venator class. I know that. For the Imperial Star Cruisers.
I do remember on the Star Trek side, there was one scene. I think it was in Next Generation. For the big battle scenes, they used to sometimes have us go out and buy Hallmark Star Trek ornaments to stick them up in the background. Well, because you just needed stuff in the frame, and this was all pre-digital generation. But there was a slightly larger one that I only saw once. I wasn't there when they were shooting it, but I wandered off into the storage area, and there was a little Reliant class ship called the USS Raging Queen, which was used only in the background. But of course, they had to have their little moments of amusement in a 12-hour shoot day.
That is
but you're right. That's a really good point. You don't think of Star Wars. I mean, the Millennium Falcon, yes.
The Falcon, yes.
But name one other. Other than that, and the Death Star.
Luke's X-wing, maybe.
Yeah, I guess.
Right. The Super Star Destroyer, another one. I don't know. But it's like all the chips are on the Falcon. It's why it's in almost every single movie, right? It's it's the one constant. All the other ones can get blown up, or you see them. The TIE Fighter, Tanya W-42. Yeah, that's right. A twin ion engine fighter, by the way.
The name he does. Very impressive of you, Anthony. Do we have one more ad, or are we clear?
We're clear.
Okay. We're at 56 minutes.
I told you were so worried. We were planning. Everybody listening, we were planning this episode, and Rod does
very
this
well,
great.
Apparently,
Rod does this great planning. Well, maybe this can be part one, and we can come back at it later, right? We can talk about the TV shows versus the TV shows.
Well, let's let the people tell us on Discord whether they want us to come back.
That's right.
Much less come back for this.
That's right.
But I think just to close the point, I think you bring up a good point, which is the Enterprise certainly is iconic. I have to say though, when Next Generation came out, the series, and I saw that Herman Zimmerman design for the Enterprise D, I was not thrilled.
You don't like the Galaxy class ship?
The clean lines of the 1701A, God, I'm such a nerd, versus that D with that kind of weird organic orifice. I won't go into what I really think it looks like, but it was just so
That's
so
the
weird
deflector
looking.
dish, Rod. Come on now.
It was just dumb.
It protects them from space dust.
The problem with the D was you had to be really careful what angle you lit it from, because you'll see in the show it always looks good because those guys, one of whom was a dear friend of mine at the time, knew how to light that thing at its best. But you see, like on a video box cover or something at the time, you'd see that they'd have the B team come in and just toss the model up and grab a cover shot instead of pulling a frame out of the show, and they would bring the key light around onto the deflector dish, which completely obliterated it, and it just looked awful. It was a really hard thing to light, but anyway, that's
by the way,
in the weeds.
I'm going to point out real quickly, just in our Discord, Wizardling is talking about Home One, which is one of the iconic support Rebellion ships. I think Admiral Akbar commands.
Oh, he's the reptile guy, right?
Yeah, it's a trap. So that's him. So that's him. That was his ship. That's a good call out, Whistling. That's a really good one. So,
well, and if we're talking about iconic ships, the Expanse, the Rocinante. That's quite an impressive one.
We are getting all of our franchises like we just got to.
Well, I feel like we're a couple of pigs rolling around in the mud here a little bit, but let's talk about acting, shall we?
Acting. Okay.
So when I think of the first, Star Trek, of course, as a kid, even I remember looking at William Shatner thinking, this guy is so heavy-handed and so obvious and so indicating. And it wasn't until much later, decades later, that I realized, while Shatner has a style, quote unquote, that could be a little heavy-handed most of the time, without him, the rest of the ensemble wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So that, but I thought of the actors of the original cast, I thought Leonard Nimoy by far was the most skillful. I won't say talented, but skillful in terms of how he nailed that character for Spock in a way that nobody else in that original cast did.
Yeah, Leonard Nimoy in the first pilot too. You know, he was.
Well, the first pilot he was kind of excitable. It wasn't until the series kind of got into like episode 6 or 7 that I felt he really settled down. And then, of course, in Star Wars, I mean, what can best Darth Vader being voiced by James Earl Jones? I mean,
who passed away just last month, right?
Yeah.
So,
on the other hand, the young, oh good lord, the lead character, I'm blanking on his name.
Well, Luke Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker, yeah.
Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill, thank you.
Voice of the Joker in the animated.
Well, and again,
but
here's another guy that really matured into his skills. I felt as the young Luke Skywalker. To me, he was kind of foppish. You know, it was not as appealing.
He's really
as,
complaining. Really, as a parent,
whines, yeah.
Like I loved Star Wars. Going as a kid, I wanted to be Luke Skywalker. You know, with like yeah, I wanted to be adopted like by. Wait
a minute.
You know, and
how
have a
could
whole
you
other
not
thing.
want to be Han Solo?
Well, because I thought like you have a laser sword. You know, I mean, who wants a jalopy beaten up ship that does
and a dog that talks. Yeah.
When you could have a laser sword and like mind powers. But then like as a parent watching it like years later, all I can think of is how whiny he is the entire time and how entitled he is and how much he looks
just like our children.
I know, you know, and he, you know, he gets asked to do a simple chore, wash the brand new equipment that we need to farm to survive. And he's like, I want to go to Tashi Station to pick up the power converters. You know, come on. You know, do you know who doesn't whine? You know who doesn't whine? Scotty. He will fix it for you and he will fix it fast because he knows that the life of the crew depends on it. You know, maybe Wesley Crusher. Noted. But the guy turned all right.
Don't go there.
Maybe they could be friends. And in some
why do we have a 15-year-old on the bridge driving the ship? Because he's the very best we've got. It's like, what are you talking about?
Because our target demographic needs to see themselves.
Exactly. I mean, anyway.
I was there for it. I was of the age of Wesley Crusher on the ship. I was like, yeah, that's me. Where can I get that sweater? I still want that sweater.
It wasn't you, but I have to tell you, you grew up to be better looking than him.
I don't know. I disagree. Anthony, man. He's got a nice beard.
Anthony, pop in here, will you please? He just transported in. So what do you mean you didn't get through Star Trek? The original series? How can you not enjoy all those fluorescent colors and those mini skirts and, you know,
just so slow and
slow? Did you watch the first?
Did
you watch the first season of Next Generation? You talk about slow.
No, that was bad. Yeah.
I mean, until they got the cool collars, it was not.
I'm actually rewatching TNG, and I'm on the last season. I think I'm like 5 episodes from the end, and the last season's not too great either. I'm starting to lose attention. TNG
last season of which? Oh, TNG.
Yeah.
Oh, what is that?
You got a hole in your head?
Oh, oops! I forgot green screen. Never mind.
Is it a green hat? What is that?
It was a green hat that was having a bad moment there. Okay, well, I guess that's fair. So those of you who have seen the Next Generation series end to end will remember a 2-parter called "The Best of Both Worlds."
Yes,
which for my money was the best show, the best episode of the series, and I was blessed to be able to be on set for a day of that during the
don't
poker
spoil
game
it for me
at the end.
I'm not there yet.
Okay, well, there was a poker game. It was the big emotional wrap up, and I was there to watch that. Watching Brent Spiner have the assistant director ask girls out for him, who were standing around watching. It was a very strange moment there, but I love the episode. It's the Borg encounter, and it was a season ending and beginning 2-parter. So it was the end of one season, beginning of the next. At the cliffhanger, William Riker, the first officer, is facing down their former captain, who's been turned into a Borg.
He just told you not to spoil it for him.
I know.
He just told you.
That doesn't spoil it. And at the critical moment, he goes, "Mr. Worf, fire." He's going to fire on his own captain, right? So this was like a delicious, one of the best cliffhangers I had ever seen. So a year later or so, I run out because I hear the Laserdisc edition has finally been released, and I got to have it. Big, shiny, specular platters, 13 inches across from my Laserdisc player. Horrible way to watch movies. Put it in, get through the first hour, and my good pal Rick Berman, the producer of the show, who's not a good pal, who made very questionable decisions frequently, in my opinion, cut out that scene.
Wow.
They felt, it flows better without it. It's like, what? This is like one of the biggest moments in Star Trek history, and you removed it to smooth that. So it must have been a contract issue or something, because nobody in their right mind would cut that scene out. It was in it.
I went to see Best of Both Worlds Anniversary. Like, it came out on my birthday a few years ago, and it was in it. It was there, and then there was like a nice little intermission, and then we watched the next episode.
There was a hue and cry after I returned my Laserdisc. Many other people did the same thing, so I think that's why they put it back. I will just say, I love that episode, that two-parter, but when you actually rewatch it now with these 4 or 5 crew members, going after their captain, endlessly walking down these corridors, kind of looking around. I mean, there is absolutely no tension in those pre-combat moments at all. And then a Borg will walk by and he'll be like, "Hey, what's up?" There's no, and I kind of get, the Borg were cool because they were this kind of disassociated, the evil Soviet Union kind of phenomenon.
Well, they don't feel pity or remorse, and they absolutely will not stop.
Well, they're decentralized, and then when the Next Gen movie First Contact came out, and I heard they were going to have a Borg queen, I thought, oh, that's not good. You're kind of destroying the thing that made them special. But she was incredible.
Oh my God, First Contact was, I think, the best out of all of the TNG.
And Jonathan Frakes' first movie directing job.
That was his first one? I thought Clockstoppers was his first one. Clockstoppers is a teen adventure film about kids that
maybe
can
he
stop
did
time.
that one before, but very early in his career as a director anyway, other than the TV episodes. What a masterful job. And then he follows it up, and as he puts it, if you talk to him about it, the movie that put him into director jail, Thunderbirds. Which is a shame, because I thought First Contact was an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah. You got your A-B plot. You got Worf getting space sick, going out on the hull to fight the Borg. Spacesuits, spacewalks, everything. Time travel, everything. Right.
And a rarity in space movies and television. The spacesuits were padded up enough. They're very hot to wear, but they looked kind of pressurized instead of the usual baggy, floppy, loose cotton suits, jumpsuits that people wear for movies. Anthony's leaning back in his chair and giving us that kind of, how much longer are you guys going to talk?
Man, we could talk all day. Didn't we try to record like a half an hour video about this once on your boat?
Yeah. Let's see, what was it? Somebody's microphone wasn't turned on.
Someone didn't charge the microphones. And
so it was me talking and then you going. So we got to cover a few more points here. Thinking about looking at these from a standpoint of iconography, what are your impressions? Like, which one is more kind of locked into Western culture at this point? It
has to be Star Wars, though. I think when you talk about the lexicon, even now in this renaissance that we are in,
if you're going to use big words, I'm going to leave the room. Sorry, go ahead.
With Star Trek, where you have it at all different levels. My daughter thinks of one of the new Star Trek animated series, Prodigy, as like her Star Trek, because she really got into Star Trek through that show, and it was meant to do that as a new audience thing. But I think that hands down, Star Wars is like the biggest lexicon. It has its own theme park. There isn't a Star Trek theme park. You have to go to a set visit, kind of a thing, or a convention. But there are these, vast impacts from Star Wars that I think it just transcends. I think that there is a very close, hot second for Star Trek now. It was harder than when I was younger, because you didn't have that famous. I was the only one of my friends that really liked it. Did I ever tell you that I won a Star Trek contest on the radio, Rod? Did I not tell you that?
I don't think so, but am I going to have to envy you even more than I do for you?
No, you'll think this is funny. When I was 15 years old, Star Trek 6 came out, and in '92, and the radio station was giving away tickets to the premiere in Sacramento. Remember, I grew up in Stockton, about 45 minutes away. And
actually, growing up in Stockton may explain a few things, because Star Wars is probably the most exciting thing that happened in your life after birth.
So I called in and I answered the question, which was what was McCoy's nickname with his former girlfriend on the Salt Monster episode. His nickname was Plum. by the way, and I got it
Plum?
right. Yeah, she called him Plum.
I don't remember that at all.
And so I got the answer right, and I won the prize, which was like a limo that would drive you and a guest to the premiere, and then also you won a free trip to space camp. I'm 15 years old, and I just won a free trip to space camp because of my Star Trek knowledge, right? And all the books that I was reading, and all the, you know, it was all paying off, and everything was coming up like Malik, right? It was wonderful. And then they go off the air, and they're like, "What's your name?" Tariq Malik. Where are you from? You know, from Stockton, California. How old are you? I'm 15.
Oh, no.
You have to be 18 to win the prize.
Oh, no.
And I'm sorry. So thanks for calling. Hang up.
See you around.
Then the announcer comes on. He says, "Oh my gosh, the contest is still open because the guy, Tariq who answered wasn't 18. You have to be 18." Girl calls in. "Hi, it's Mary Jane, whatever. Yeah. The answer is Plum. Oh yeah, you got it." They didn't even change the question. "Oh, by the way, I'm calling for my dad." "Oh, okay, it's okay. If you're calling for your dad must be 18. So she got to go to the movie, and I had to go in the rain to the Stockton Royale and watch it there. So anyway, that's my Star Trek 6.
But I mean, going to the rain to see the movie is not nearly as much of a loss as not getting to go to space camp, for God's sakes.
Well, I did get to go to space camp later that summer, so that was
pay for it, right?
Yeah, we had to pay for it, but I could have gone on my like in the Star Trek trappings and everything. There's a whole alternate universe where I went to that premiere and like became like a super Star Trek megastar or whatever. You don't know. We don't know what happened. We don't know. Okay, that's my spiel. I felt I had to share.
I guess so. I agree with your assessment way back there of the iconic values.
Wizardling is right in Discord. I was cheated out of awesomeness, Wizardling. You are correct, right? Okay,
but only temporarily, because you are the most awesome thing on podcasts.
This is known. At
least when you do your episode intros. But I have to say, I mean, Star Trek, I think, of course, depending on who your favorite captain is, there's a lot of strength of character there that's worth exploring. Spock's morality is worth exploring. The Prime Directive is certainly worth exploring.
Yeah.
But in Star Wars, although I feel like it's a little bit like Trek. Every other sequel kind of misses the target a little bit. But the whole following of the big hero's journey mythos is kind of compelling.
Yeah, there's not as much variety because that hero's journey is one family, or one small part of what is hinted at as a wider galaxy, and they've tried on the Disney / Luke the Star Wars side to really expand that, and it's been very hit or miss. Whereas in Star Trek, you get it. There's a pipeline that gets officers up there. You know what caliber they are. Now you have all these ships, and you can make up your own ship and your own crew, and they can go have their own adventures because they've got this philosophy to steal from. Okay, Anthony brings up Andor, the TV show. He's right. That's a really great.
He put
TV
a star
show
next to it. I thought it was a splat.
No, that's a great Andor.
I haven't seen it.
A Star Wars.
Now, was that before or after Mandalorian? Which I didn't see
it came out after. Mandalorian's awesome too, the first season, but Andor is about like the start of the rebellion with Cassian Andor from Rogue One, which was another really awesome movie that filled in some gaps.
So wait a minute. So Rogue One was the one. The young lady is the protagonist, right?
Yes.
And then, so you've got her, you've got the...
her dad designed the Death Star.
The stormtrooper who kind of comes over to her side of things. No,
Cassian Andor is like the spy that like recruits her because they have to get in to find her dad. Her dad is the designer of the Death Star.
Okay, all I remember is what wasn't... it wasn't Rogue One. What's the one where
Rogue One is the movie...
meets up with Luke Skywalker at the end, who's now an older adult, up on the bluff at the end of the movie. That's
the Last Jedi, I think, is what you're talking about.
I don't think so, but okay. Anyway,
the Last Jedi is when she trains.
But
you're thinking of the Force Awakens. Yeah, at the end of that's when she meets Luke. Rey meets Luke, And,
Okay, so that's the same one where the and I'm sorry, guys, I don't know the names of these characters because I prefer like real science fiction instead of children's shows. But there's a
you can
character
watch
that
Andor without watching anything. Like, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to watch Rogue One because that's actually Andor's before that. But it's like,
okay, but the
it's not really about anyone in particular.
The point I was going for was there was an actor in the film I'm thinking of where she meets Luke at the end, who's a pilot. He's kind of like the new Han Solo.
Yeah, Poe Dameron.
Yeah, who comes in and his acting style, he was kind of like he should have been this young, swaggering, I don't know, Italian clock carver or something. His acting style was so different from virtually everybody else.
Oh,
he had
I
this
think
kind of a Bronx accent, and it's like this guy doesn't belong in this movie. He's tearing it to shreds dramatically.
I think that was the point about those new films, were to humanize them and make them a little bit more down to earth. There's a really great scene in that in the final.
They're just money
sequel.
machines.
No, well, where Poe Dameron and Finn, the former stormtrooper turned rebel, meet each other as they're getting ready for the big battle, and they're like, general, nice to meet you, general, because they have all been promoted as generals as like 20-something, 30-something year old like newbies, and how crazy that is, and everyone forgets that's what happened to Luke and Leia and Han Solo. They all just got promoted to generals automatically, in those films, and that's just crazy. You don't get just promoted to like starship captain in Star Trek unless your captain dies trying to defeat this time-traveling Romulan overlord that has just showed up and rewritten your entire timeline in Star Trek 2009. And he earned it. That was Thor, by the way. He earned it. He became acting captain, saved the whole ship, also little James T. Kirk, and he was only captain for like 9 minutes. That's what he did.
Well, and that's really well put, because you do, that is something that always irritated me about Star Wars and frankly, a lot of sci-fi television. You see these, beautiful looking early 20s. It's a little bit like the Baywatch cast, right? Come strutting onto the stage, and they're talking with the maturity of their years. And the conceit behind it is, they're the very best we've got. It's like, well, what about these guys in their 50s, the guys and women in their 50s who have been doing this all their lives and have won major battles and, have the equivalent of military PhDs? Oh, no, we're going to get this 22-year-old kid because he won a bar fight or something. We're getting the signal that it's time to stop blathering and wrap
because
this
the force
up.
is strong with this one. So
Yeah. So in summary, this is my summary. I want to hear yours, of course. For Star Trek in general and the motion picture specifically, because it was kind of the beginning of that whole big phenomenon beyond the original show, I got to give it props for a strong classic science fiction story, little long, but the Voyager conceit, besides the whole Star Trek universe that preceded it, was pretty strong science fiction, if not the strongest movie script. It was kind of highbrow. It's kind of classical almost in nature. And for Star Wars, fun space opera, kind of like the equivalent of visual pop music and Andrew Lloyd Webber, a little bit like popcorn to me, but fun. The one thing that I would give Star Trek a very soft demerit for, Star Wars a soft demerit for, is you really can't have a Star Wars movie without a war in it. Not only is in the title, but it's throughout the movie franchise. Whereas Star Trek, off and on, tried to kind of back away from that because Roddenberry was very, very much a humanist, and that was not what he liked. That said, it was noticed during the production of Next Gen and Deep Space Nine that the ratings just soared every time there was a fight.
Yeah.
And kind of plummeted every time there was just a morality.
Well, that's why
message.
you get the Jem'Hadar War, and that totally rewrites the arc of DS9 when you get that war going on. So
give us your expert summary.
Well, I think that if I have to make the case, there's a reason why I will build Lego starships to end all, but I don't rush out to buy the latest greatest Lego model for Star Wars. I think that for for a lot of reasons, both, from my own youth experience and like the promise of the future and how wide embracing that Star Trek really is the clear winner. However, I would say this, both of these franchises get people excited about space in one way or another. And if that was the only metric, I think that they're both winners, right? But I think that Star Trek just has had much more of an impact on space exploration overall. That resonates with me personally very strongly, and because of that, it has a bit of a higher rank in my mind. And I've heard a lot of astronauts who said that they were inspired by watching Star Trek as a kid. Now they get to actually fly in space, and it's very circular that way. But
yeah, astronauts and engineers and scientists of various stripes, but especially working in the space trade, do cite Star Trek. I can't say I've heard many of them cite Star Wars, even though it probably got them into science fiction.
I'm sure it must have done something.
Maybe that was the gateway drug for the next generation, if you will, to get interested in Star Trek. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. We should ask people what they think. What is that? What do our listeners think? Who would win in a battle? Should we do a part 2 or 3 or 4? Point, should we do a TV one?
At this point,
what a radio plays.
We're turning into another This Week in Tech episode at 3 hours and wishing we just get on with it. All right. Well, so I do, pursuant to that, do want to thank everyone for joining us for episode 131. That was just such a profound thing. I had to clear my throat. Star Trek versus Star Wars. Tariq, where can we find you fulfilling your prime directive these days?
Well, you can find me at space.com as always, or on the Twitters at, or X, I guess I keep forgetting that, at Tariq J. Malik. This weekend, for one day only, you'll find me at Pace University for the space.com Space Force Hackathon. We've got some students that are going to go ahead. Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about this. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm learning all about it too. It's a special event that we've teamed up with the Space Force to do. Hopefully we'll have more on it at space.com on who wins, but we've got a bunch of teams that are going to tackle some kind of space programming challenge, and then there's two folks who are going to go head to head to see who can build a computer, like an actual PC computer, the fastest, with a 3-hour time limit, and that's going to be really exciting. So
you could build a PC in about 40 minutes.
Okay, it took me 2 days, and I cried because I got stuck. I actually put a tablecloth over it so I didn't have to look at it for the rest of the afternoon.
Wow!
Before I came back to it, I'm going to tell that story tomorrow too. But it's going to be at Pace University if anyone wants to come and
so
and
this
cheer
is
on
interesting.
these folks.
I mean, you run space.com, and yet this is something you just found out about. Who set it up?
No, I've known about it.
Oh.
But I've been working with our events team on it. But the Space Force and our events team have been putting this on in partnership with Pace University.
That is cool.
So I'm going to go and just watch these computer eggheads at work. Probably all of them have passed differential equations, so I'm going to not hold that against them. So.
Yeah, I was.
I'm going to carry that beef to my grave.
I was giving a talk to a group of either 200 or 300 Mexican students yesterday who were doing this very cool space settlement design competition that the National Space Society runs, and that came up.
Differential equations.
They said, so why are you a journalist instead of an engineer? I said, because I'm not smart enough to be an engineer. I got the differential equations and choked. And then, of course, one of the co-hosts goes, oh, well, so you saying you couldn't get through the book of Hunka Bunka? And I'm like, dude, really?
Someone asked me if I would
push
the
pin in my heart. Yeah?
Someone asked me if I would go for my PhD in something. I'm like, no.
I considered it. So as I was winding down my master's degree at Stanford, I went into my advisor who had been very kind to me getting through my master's. And I said, I'm thinking about moving on towards a doctoral program on the education side. And he leaned back in his chair and smiled. And he had worked in television himself. And he said, go back to Hollywood. That's where you belong.
I don't know, man. If it gets an extra zero on the paycheck, I might go do it. So.
Well, he was just letting me know that it probably wouldn't be worth me even trying to stick around. And of course, speaking of sticking around, you can find me at the National Space Society at nss.org or pilebooks.com or at astromagazine.com. Please do remember to drop us a line. I'm sure there will be a few coming by the time this is all over. At twit.tv, we welcome your comments, suggestions, and telling us that we were full of beans on this comparative episode between Star Wars and Star Trek. New episodes of this very long podcast publish every Friday on your Saturday podcatcher, so make sure to on your favorite podcatcher. So make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and give us reviews. We'll take whatever you offer. And don't forget, of course, you can follow the Twit Tech Podcast Network at Twit on Twitter and on Facebook, and twit.tv on Instagram. Thank you very much for putting up with us today.
Thank you.
And may the force be with you.